Hello and welcome to the session. So we have started talking about the different types of living things. So previously we have looked at different important types of living things, including bacteria, protists. So now we are going to move forward and talk about some other important types of living things. So the first ones in this regard are the fungi. Fungi, they are eukaryotic organisms, and most of them they are multicellular. So we know fungi. Um, um, you would have seen mushrooms. So mushrooms are examples of fungi. Likewise, we use yeast for baking, like bread, making bread, and other baking processes. So yeast and mushrooms, these are two important examples of this group of living things, which are called as fungi. So fungi are eukaryotes. So they are heterotrophic organisms. So heterotrophs, these are the organisms which are unable to make their own food. So therefore, they are consumers or decomposers. So those living things which cannot make their food, these are called as heterotrophs. Those living things which are able to make their food, for example, plants, they are called as autotrophs. So autotrophs are the living things which are able to make their own food. Fungi, since they are unable to make their food, so these are heterotrophs. Fungi, they contain a cell wall around their cells. The cell wall is made up of a carbohydrate that is called as chitin. Although fungi, they contain a cell wall, but they do not have chloroplast in their cells. So fungi, they cannot make their food. That's why they are heterotrophs. Since these properties, they do not match with any other organisms, so these living things are placed in this separate kingdom, that's kingdom fungi. This is a figure from the book, and this figure shows that the fungi, they have many different shapes and appearances. So you can see that there are three types of fungi which are shown here. So you can see that their structures, their colors, and appearance is different from each other. So fungi, they are heterotrophs, hence they are not able to make their food because they do not have chloroplast in them. So fungi, they obtain their food mostly by decomposing organic material. So the fungi, they release these enzymes from their cells, and the enzymes, they break down nutrients in the surrounding, and hence they are able to take up those materials from the surrounding. So one way of obtaining food is that most fungi, they are decomposers. They would degrade organic material in their surrounding and obtain nutrients. Some of the fungi, they are parasites. They live in association with other living things, and in the process, they obtain their nutrients from that organism. The organism with which they associate is called as the host. So the parasitic fungi, they obtain their food from the host, but in the process, they cause harm to that host. So parasites are those living things which associate with other living things, obtain nutrients from them, but in turn cause them harm. So some of the diseases, they are caused by fungi. For example, one of the common disease caused by fungi is called athlete's foot. In addition, fungi can also cause other types of infections. So some fungi, they are parasites. They can cause diseases in animals as well as in plants. Some of the fungi, they are able to have a mutualistic relationship with other living things. For example, some fungi, they are associated with the roots of plants. They're found in the soil. They associate with the roots of the plant. So this relationship is called as mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza is the association of the fungi with the roots of the plants. This is a mutually beneficial relationship. In this relationship, the fungi they help in increasing the absorptive surface area for the roots, and in turn, plants provide them with essential substances, and therefore they can obtain their nutrients from the plant. So this is a mutualistic relationship which is mutually beneficial both for the plants as well as for the fungi. So fungi they obtain food through different mechanisms. Fungi, most of them are multicellular. Some of the fungi they are unicellular, meaning that they are made up of only one cell. Most fungi are multicellular. The cells of the fungi they are arranged in form of long filament-like structures. These filaments are called as hyphae. Many hyphae collectively make up a mass which comprise the body of the fungus. This collective mass of all of the hyphae that is called as the mycelium. So the body of the fungi is called as the mycelium, and the mycelium in turn is made up of chains of cells which are called as hyphae. So this is a diagram from the book, and this diagram shows a fungus. So this top part which you see, this umbrella-like structure, that is the mushroom. And then, so mushroom is like the reproductive part of the fungus. Mushrooms, they contain spores in them. Spores are a mechanism of reproduction. So the fungi, they release spores from this part, that's a mushroom, this umbrella-shaped structure. So the fungi, they release spores, and when those spores, they reach a suitable environment, they will start to grow and give rise to a new fungus. They will produce a new mycelium. So the spores, producing spores is a mechanism of reproduction in fungi. And then you see that this underground part, so the mushroom is actually present above the surface. And then you see this underground part of the fungus is made up of many long filaments. So in the inset, the filaments have been magnified here. These filaments are called as hyphae. Collectively, all of the hyphae, they form this mass that is called as the mycelium. Fungi, they are classified based upon their shape as well as their mechanism of reproduction. So fungi, one of the mechanism is that they reproduce by producing spores. So one type of fungi, they are called as thread-like fungi. One common example is the bread mold. Bread mold is the common fungus which you can find on growing on most of the food materials. So sometimes you see that when food like breads or other food materials, when they spoil, so there is formation of a black colored layer on the surface of that food material. So this black colored layer is actually the, the fungus. It's called as the common mold or the bread mold. So when you magnify, so this is the right panel, figure 5, it shows a magnified view of the fungus. So these filaments, you see, these are the hyphae. The filaments, they contain these spherical structures on them. The spherical structures, they are called as sporangia. Sporangia are the structures which contains spores in them. So when the sporangia rupture, they release the spores. The spores travel through air, water, or through other means. And when they land on some suitable environment, they start to grow. In this manner, the spores, they will give rise to a new fungus. So these fungi are called as thread-like fungi because their bodies are made up of these thread-like structures. The next type of fungi, they're called as sac fungi. So yeast is one example. This is a diagram showing the cells of yeast. Yeast is a unicellular fungus. That means its body is made up of only one cell. Yeast is widely used for fermentation. It's used for producing baking products like breads, cakes, and other baking products. So, yeast is an example of sac fungi. Yeast reproduce by this process called budding. So, there is one parent cell, and then an outgrowth or a bud forms on that cell, and then the bud keeps on growing. Eventually, the bud will break off, and that will give rise to a new cell. So, in this manner, the yeast cells, which are sac fungi, they reproduce by the process of budding. The next type of fungi, they are called as club fungi. Mushrooms are example of club fungi. So you see here in this picture, you can see these different types of mushrooms. Most of the mushrooms, they are poisonous. Only a few types of the mushrooms, they are edible. So therefore, you should only consume mushrooms from which are like selected and already packed. You can't like simply pluck mushrooms from your garden and use them for eating. Most mushrooms, they are poisonous. So the mushrooms, they are example of club fungi. In the next type of fungi, they are called as non-mushroom club fungi. Bracket fungi is one such example. Rust and smut, these are fungi which infects crops. So here in this diagram, you can see that this brownish structure. So these are the fungi which are appended to the to a tree and to the surface. And these fungi, they are attached just like shells or brackets. So therefore, the name comes bracket fungi. Then there is those fungi which don't fit into any other category, so they are characterized as imperfect fungi. Penicillium is one important example of this group of fungi. Now, penicillium is important because this fungus was found to produce an antibiotic called penicillin. So, penicillin is like the first antibiotic produced by a fungus, and it was used to treat infections. Before the discovery of penicillin, so the infections, wounds, they would result in infections, and most of the wounds they would be infected, and it would lead to a lethal condition in many cases. So penicillin, which is an antibiotic, it actually like saved a lot of lives, especially during the World War. So this is some basic information regarding fungi. Now we move on to the next type of living things, which are plants. This is a figure from the book, and this figure shows a micrograph. This is a picture taken from a microscope. And this picture, it shows the cells of plant. So you can see that in the picture, all cells are not alike. Some cells towards the center are smaller as compared to the others which are present on the periphery. Some cells, they have these green colored structures which are the chloroplast. So you see on the periphery, the cells, they contain these green colored dots. So those structures are the chloroplast. However, the cells in the middle, they do not contain chloroplast in them. So the idea is to show that all plant cells are not alike. Depending upon the nature and the function, the cells are different from each other. Yes, but indeed, one of the defining parameters for the plant cells is that they contain chloroplast in them, and hence they are able to carry out photosynthesis. So that's one remarkable feature of the plants, that they are able to produce their own food. They are producers. So plants are living things, they are eukaryotes. and they are multicellular organisms. Since they have chloroplast, so they are able to make their own food. They're producers. Those living things which can make their food, they're called as autotrophic organisms. We human beings cannot make our food, so we are heterotrophic organisms. Plants and algae are examples of autotrophic, meaning that they can make their own food. Plant cells have a cell wall, and this cell wall is made up of a carbohydrate called cellulose. Previously, we have talked about the plant cell wall. Plant cells, they contain chlorophyll in them. So they have this organelle called chloroplast. Chloroplasts are the small structures, the organelles, which contain this green colored pigment called chlorophyll. And chlorophyll is important for capturing the energy of sunlight, and this is needed for the process of photosynthesis. Plants are able to make their food, hence they are called as producers. In addition to producing food, through the process of photosynthesis, plants also produce oxygen. And oxygen is needed by all living things for carrying out respiration. So one important aspect of plants is that they have chloroplasts and they are able to carry out photosynthesis. So by the process of photosynthesis, plants make their food, which is glucose. So they take up carbon dioxide from air, they take up water from the soil, and they harvest the energy of sunlight for carrying out this chemical reaction. And through a series of chemical reactions, they produce their food, which is glucose. In the process, they also produce oxygen as a byproduct. So this is a diagram from the book, and it is showing the leaves of the plant. So the plants, the leaves are green in color. Likewise, grass is also green in color because it contains chlorophyll in it. So chlorophyll absorbs the energy of sunlight, and it is important for carrying out photosynthesis. Another important feature of plants is that they contain a waxy protective layer on their surface. That protective layer is called as cuticle. So a cuticle is like a layer of wax around the body of the plant, and it helps in preventing the loss of water. Plants, they show a variation in the thickness of cuticle. Those plants which live in water scarce conditions like deserts or other conditions where water availability is low, so they have a thick cuticle around their bodies. For example, cactus plants, which are found in desert, so they have a very thick cuticle. And the significance of having thick cuticle is that it conserves water in the body and it prevents the loss of water through evaporation. So the thickness of cuticle, it depends on the climate and the environment of the plant. Then we have talked previously, plant cells, they have a cell wall. So this is a diagrammatic representation. It shows a section of the cell and this outermost layer, that is the cell wall. So plant cells, they have a high pressure in their cells. So therefore, in order to protect themselves against that high pressure, they have cell wall in addition to their cell membrane. The cell wall is made up of cellulose. Another important feature of the plants is that they have specialized structures for the transport of substances in their body. There are two important types of transport tissues in plants, which are meant for the transport of food and water. Those cells, those tissues which are important for the transport of water, they are called as xylem. And then food is transported through another specialized type of tissue, which is called as the phloem. So xylem transports water and phloem transports food through the body of the plant. These two types of tissues are found uh, close to each other in the body of the plant, and collectively they form, they actually form bundle-like structures. So these are called as the vascular bundles, sometimes also called as the vascular tissue. Some plants, they do not have vascular tissue in them. So that means since they do not have vascular tissue, they don't have a proper mechanism of transport of substances in their body. So therefore, the transport mainly occurs through diffusion, and diffusion cannot take place over a large area. So therefore, these plants, they are small in size. They cannot grow large in size because they do not have specialized transport mechanism. So the first type of plants, they are called as the non-vascular plants. Non-vascular plants are considered to be evolutionarily primitive. They do not have the vascular tissues in them. They don't have a specialized transport mechanism. So mosses, liverworts, so these are example of non-vascular plants. So the first group of plants, these are called as non-vascular plants. These are small plants and they do not have vascular tissues in them. Then there are vascular plants. Vascular plants are those plants which have the vascular tissue in them. They are relatively larger in size. Now, the vascular plants, they may produce seeds or they may not produce seeds. So the second group of plants, that is called as the seedless plants. Seedless plants, they're vascular, but they do not produce seeds. Rather, they produce spores. Producing seed is a mechanism of reproduction in plants. Plants, they produce seeds. When the seeds grow, they germinate, they give rise to a new plant. So producing seed is a mechanism of reproduction in plants. So the second group of plants, they are called seedless plants. Seedless plants do not produce seeds. Rather, they reproduce by producing spores. For example, fern plants are examples of seedless plants. They produce spores on their leaves, and when these spores are shed, so they reach a suitable environment, they will grow and give rise to a new fern plant. So the second group of plants, that is called as the seedless plants. Then those plants which produce seeds, they are called seed plants. Seed plants are again of two types. So the third group of plants, they're called as the non-flowering plants. They're also called as gymnosperms. They do not produce seed. They do not produce a fruit. They don't have any flowers. Flower is the reproductive organ of the plant, and flower develops into a fruit. And the fruit bears seeds in it. When the seeds, they grow, they produce a new plant. So there are two groups of plants which produce seeds. The first group are the non-flowering plants or the gymnosperms. So although they produce seeds as a mechanism of reproduction, but they do not have any flowers. So pine tree is an example of non-flowering plant. Their seeds are produced in special structures which are called as cones. So the pine tree has cones on it, and the cones contain the reproductive cells. So the seeds are produced on these cones. The last type of plants, these are called as the flowering plants. They are also called as angiosperms. So these are the plants which produce seeds, and their seeds are enclosed in fruits. Now, fruit is a part of the plant which develops from a flower. So all these plants, like the ornamental plants which have flowers, and all these plants which produce fruits are examples of the flowering plants. So a rose plant, marigold, apple, mango. So these are a few examples of flowering plants. So flower is the reproductive structure in the plant, and eventually it develops into a fruit, and the fruit contains seeds in it. So these are the four main types of the plants. So the first group of plants are non-vascular plants. Non-vascular plants do not have vascular tissues in them. They do not have xylem or phloem. So therefore, they cannot transport substances over a large area. That's why they are small in size. Mosses are example of non-vascular plants. The second group of plants are the seedless plants. These are vascular plants, but they do not produce seed. Rather, they produce spores. Fern plant is an example of seedless plants. Then the third group of plants, they're called as non-flowering plants, also known as gymnosperms. These are the plants which are vascular, they produce seeds, but their seeds are not enclosed in a fruit. They do not produce any flowers. So they have these structures called cones, and their seeds are produced on these cones. Pine tree is an example of gymnosperm. And then the fourth type of plants are the flowering plants, also called as angiosperms. These are the plants which contain flowers on them, and flowers they turn into a fruit. So therefore, all these plants which produce flowers or which produce fruits. So these are examples of flowering plants or angiosperms. So these are the two other important types of living things, including fungi and plants. So you are required regarding fungi, you are required to know about the, the types of the fungi. You are required to know that fungi reproduce by producing spores. You are expected to know the terms hyphae, which are the filaments which make up the body of the fungus. So the hyphae collectively they are called as the mycelium. Then there are other type of living things are the plants. So you are required to know the characteristics of plants. They carry out photosynthesis. They have cuticle around their body to prevent the evaporation of water. They have chloroplasts and hence carry out photosynthesis. They have cell wall, and most of the plants they have these special tissues for transport. Xylem are meant for the transport of water, and phloem are meant for the transport of food material in the body of the plant. And lastly, you are required to know about these four major groups of plants: non-vascular, seedless, non-flowering or gymnosperms, and lastly, flowering or angiosperms. So we have um, one more type of living things, which are the animals, but that would be, we are going to study about animals afterwards. So these topics, up to fungi and plants, they are going to be included for the midterm exam.